What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Double Doors Show by Dust2US. Over here, we've got Liam at Dust2. I also have our very special guest, Graham at messioso Pitt, who is the general manager of Complexity CSGO. We're going to be talking with him a bunch today about the team and also a lot about the other North American teams that we have, because obviously this is a North American show, so we have to get a general manager's thoughts on what's been going around. There have been a lot of changes since our last show about 2 weeks ago. We're seeing a lot of teams kind of finalizing their rosters. We've seen teams like Evil Geniuses bring in a multitude of players, have a lot of rumors out there. Complexity themselves have made a change. Liquid have someone maybe making it. Like, we still have incomplete information there. And then we have all the other stuff with the Brazilian team. So we're going to start it off first by trying to talk about Liquid YEKINDAR. We're going to bleed into the show a little bit. And then we're going to get into the complexity stuff right after we talk about Evil Geniuses. And there, we're going to be taking in any questions live from the stream audience. We'll select a few. We don't want to go with any too hot heaters there. We got to be nice to our guests. But this is a good chance for everyone that is part of the show and watching the show, and that can be listening later on in the podcast on wherever you get your podcast from. A good opportunity to just hear what others have to say and some other crowd questions. So I think the first thing that we have to talk about here is going to be YEKINDAR on Liquid. Obviously, a lot of hype about this player. We saw how well he performed in Cologne. We saw how the team really changed. We talked about that to death. But there has been no official statement of him being signed. And we reported earlier that he's going to stay on to Blast, but we don't know any specifics after. So Liam, I would kind of want to put you on the spot here as this first one. How important is it going to be for Liquid to keep YEKINDAR long term?
I think it's super important for them to keep him long term, but I also think at the same time it's kind of like out of their hands in a sense. Because I think it's such a difficult thing at the moment to try and get players who are connected into Russian orgs at all, or Russian players in general. Like, we've just seen today that SDY seems to be kind of like locked down to Navi. Like, it seems like they want to keep him, but they're very kind of timid and like actually announcing, yes, we have SDY full time. And it's the same with Liquid YEKINDAR. Like, we had the interview that I did with him at Cologne where he beat around the bush. He said, I think I might want to stay with this team if it's possible, which is kind of showing me he wants to stay with the team. He's kind of gelled with the players, but it's kind of out of their hands at this point. Like, when I talked to Naf as well, he was like, I want to know if he's staying. I don't know. Like, it's not up to me at this point. But it's so hard to say. It's so hard to like actually give an opinion on it because everyone knows how good YEKINDAR is. Top 10 rifler in the world. You add that to Elige, Naf, OC, and Nitro, who's more of like a hands-off IGL who doesn't kind of get in the way of like trying to get his positions. Like, he's willing to give up stuff for his star players. It's like a perfect recipe for them to have an amazing team. It's just so uncertain with the whole situation that we unfortunately find ourselves in now.
Yeah, Graham, I don't want to put you on the spot, obviously talking about another team and transfers there, but maybe you can provide some insight as to, with a Russian organization, just hypothetically speaking, how hard do you imagine it is for Liquid to try and get their man?
I don't know, because I mean, Cloud9 made it look very easy with the right connections and the right methodology, right? So
yeah,
I don't know whether it's just a perception issue, if they want to do it the right way, or if there's a wrong way to do it about it. But I'm sure if they really want to, I think they can, and I think they will, assuming player and organization still wants to do it after. Well, I think they confirmed he's setting in for Blast, right?
Yeah. Well, they actually never came out with anything. We just know that he's on the roster listed, and with nothing saying he isn't playing, and there being no announcements, all I can kind of believe is that he will be participating.
Apparently, one of their GMs, I assume Steve, confirmed it on their Discord, at least, that he's playing for Blast. So,
all right, so
I'm getting that info from the Complexity Discord from one of the fans. So I can't tell you how reliable that is, but that's the source. So, yeah, I would assume that based on talks I've had with Liquid as well, like informal, just casual things, it seems like they're extremely happy with YEKINDAR. So I'm sure they want that cooperation to continue, which is why he's playing at Blast. And I think they'll get it over the line in due time. But obviously, time is ticking. The RMR roster lock. I don't know what the actual roster lock is for the RMR teams. Obviously, we as Complexity are going through the qualifiers, so our roster lock is a lot sooner. The
fun
RMR
fact:
teams must have one soon.
We actually did find out ESL released when they announced also their change of one of the European RMR dates. They've also announced that the roster lock is going to be September 8th. Is what I said. Yes, September
not super
8th.
far away.
Okay, so that's after Blast. So they got a week after.
So it's after Blast.
Yeah,
it's right after the end of I think all the qualifiers. But it is about like a month away from the RMRs, which are still not declared exactly. Like,
well, the date's up.
Are they really doing all three at the same time? I guess is my question. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone that can do it, it probably is ESL.
That's fair.
Realistically, especially now, with the merger with Faceit, I think they, at least I imagine they got some kind of access to the North American studio that Faceit used to use for all the ECS and Flashpoint stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do we think do we think that the RMR is going to be in America for the Americas?
I have no information on that, and I wish. I did.
All right. Wink, wink.
No,
stuff that
there's no wink, wink. There is no information. there's no secret information. Underhand stuff. No one has confirmation on that yet. We're all waiting on ESL. So,
well, that's a little concerning as well. Like we were about 2 months away. People have got to figure this out, and I don't know. I would like to know. I'd like to see if I can go exactly to the RMRs. Figure out where they are.
Yeah,
I think with the RMR, everyone was pretty certain about the dates because when you looked at the events that were announced and the short turnover until the major itself, it didn't leave them with a lot of time. Yeah. But even at Cologne, it seemed so up in the air. No one had really any idea what was going on, for certain at least.
Yeah. Anyways, getting kind of back to YEKINDAR there. I want to say that this is going to be an interesting thing that Liquid, I think, is kind of continuing with having always the North American core, but then flirting with a European import. They've done this several times. They had Simple as a European import. They've tried Shocks. They've tried Pimp. They've tried all of these different players. Do we think, and now kind of relating it over to you, Graham, you're bringing in a European import. Is this something that maybe North American teams have to kind of have as a evolution of who they are, bringing in this outside help to make their team better, even though we've seen one of the best NA teams ever being a full NA team when it was Liquid with Twist?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different facets to that question. Right now, I think if you want to be competitive on an international level, I think you need to have, with the current way the sort of the three main teams rosters are split, obviously no one's going to be willing to give up their entire, keys to the kingdom to make another team better. And, realistically, the finances involved in trying to build that team is probably out of reach for everyone. So the logical choice to get the players of the caliber that you need is to get a European player. I think that's the simple way to put it right now. There's lots of, these Reddit scientists who go oh yeah, these guys should just buy these two players from Complexity and this player from Liquid, and then they've got the North American super team. It's well, you go ahead and do that, and we'll move on from there. But yeah, I think right now, I think we're in a position where there is such a lack of depth of North American talent, and that's something that's it's kind of we're kind of at the I hope we're at the end of sort of the downward trend, obviously, that's been sort of going since COVID and Valorant coming out, that, we're now at the sort of the very depths of what we had, from that original kind of pipeline. And we can now sort of begin to develop more talent in the next few months and years, that the next sort of wave of roster changes when they come, whether it's in the winter or next summer, there's, some useful talent that's there. Hopefully, EG with Hext, I really hope that works out. I think that's a great pickup for them, and I hope that goes forward to them. I hope that EG's, academy teams or prospect teams or whatever they want to call them, blueprint teams, I really hope that works out, because we need to raise the level of the North American talent, and the only way to do that is to, actually put some effort in and play with these teams and actually, develop the talent. So I think EG's blueprint, as they call it, is a really cool concept, and I hope it works out, because if that's the next place I have to go to find a new player, then that's fine with me, right?
Yeah.
I have a question to put to Graham then on the topic of European players coming in as like into North American teams. We've seen YEKINDAR and the Liquid guys were saying he really helps out with calling. He's even calling strats out of spawn. Shox was like the same with Nitro. Neelan's coming in as an IGL for EG. What can you kind of say about hallzerk and his personality? Like, is he an outward guy that's going to be kind of putting forward like this European meta ideas, or?
No, but that's also, it's not necessarily something that we were looking for with the pickup. So it's sort of not an intentional. Obviously, we'd like every player to come with as many options as possible, and to be as vocal as possible within reason. Obviously, there's also the element of there's too many cooks in the kitchen. But however you want to phrase it, we have a lot of faith in Johnny JT as an in-game leader. But we're certainly looking for at least one other player to sort of help step up and move into that role as well. We think we found the solution for that, so we're working forward with that, and it's something that's a work in progress. But certainly when we came around to the hallzerk pickup, or when we were looking at the sort of the options we had available and what direction to go in, it wasn't something that we took into account a great amount. I think we were more looking for the AWP role in particular and how that player functions within the system and the roles that we have, and who is the best player that we can fit into that role, rather than looking at sort of the whole team as a whole for this specific pick.
All right, so I think now might be a good time to kind of then move on and talk about Evil Geniuses, as you had a good point over there. We should talk Evil Geniuses, as always, for us at least, at us too. Been a great source of entertainment and news, constantly surprising us with new things every single day. I think one of the big things is, as I'm looking through everything that's gone on, and I have an entire sheet as I look up on my monitor. So we had Neelan and Mistua supposed to join. Neelan joins, which a little out of nowhere it feels like, coming from K23. I can't say that I know a ton about him. He follows me on Twitter, so I'm going to say he's a great NA supporter already, and I fully love my next great IGL that I'm going to Americanize the shit out of. But Masuta, I feel very weird about this, because EG had this plan of where they were supposed to come in, use Masuta. They were going to sign up for Blast with him. They were going to go ahead, and then they realized, hey, in this loophole, it seems a little risky. Let's actually not sign Masuta anymore for the IEM Rio. We're going to bring up Hext, and now we're just not even going to sign Masuta at all, even though we registered him on the Blast roster. Like, is the advantage of playing the IEM Rio qualifier in North America that much more than signing Masuta helpful, Liam?
Are you joking?
I have to be the host here and ask these questions as softballs to generate discussion here, Graham. Okay? That is my role here on the podcast, which is now allows you for Liam or you to call me an idiot and say, of course. So Liam, call me an idiot and say, of course now.
Of course. It's like they struggled enough to get through the NA Open qualifiers and then not make it out of the NA or more qualifier. I can't imagine like the grueling process that would have been to try and even get close to getting out of the EU one. I mean, Graham, this is also the same guy that said that you guys should just go out and pick up Device when you were looking at juniors replacements. So it's the softballs that he lives for on this show.
Yeah, Ryan lives. Ryan might be all of the Reddit scientists put together.
He's the ultimate Reddit scientist. But yeah, like people kind of jumped at the EG thing, saying like, what are these two pickups? They're awful, like Masuda and Neelan. Like, this isn't what you need. I think they definitely needed a European perspective to come in terms of an IGL, because when you look at the names that are on that roster, I don't particularly think that there's a name that's jumps out to step up as a leader. Like, once you lose Stewie, who's self-admittedly not a leader. So if your leader is admitting he's not a leader, none of the players around him were going to ever step up to that. I don't think Breeze is a big enough personality. I think the same with Zerk. Like, I think they should be focusing on their game anyways, because they've kind of struggled in form. Neelan, I don't know too much about KT3, same as yourself, Ryan. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of it, in the sense that I don't think he's a established enough IGL. I think they'd need more kind of like an older head that's ready to like sit the players down and say, look, this is how we're doing it. kind of like when I talked to Cadian about it in Cologne, when I was talking about his time in Rogue, he said he came in as a bit of a more experienced IGL with a European perspective. He said, like, this is how we're going to be doing things. He was open to NA ideas, but he also said, this is how we're going to do it. This is the way that I did it in Denmark. And when they lost Cadian on Rogue, they picked up MSL, who's actually, he was one of my ideas for EG, because while MSL doesn't bring a lot in terms of fragging, I think he has established himself enough that he can build a system and get players working, like he did with North and like he did with previous rosters.
Yeah.
I personally would have liked that pickup more than Neelan, but I'm excited to see what Neelan can bring in terms of that European perspective. Masuda, I think it's a shame that they didn't get him because I think he's a bit overlooked since the whole Danish French thing. Like, it's hard to get your spots when you're dealing with two multiple time major winners. Zaiwu, one of the best players in the world, and Apex, who's already a big enough personality and like he enjoys his entering, like he gets his spots. So I think he was a bit kind of underrated towards the end of his time in Vitality. But yeah, I think it makes sense for them to go through NA. Going back to the original question, because not a hope are they making out of EU for this or more, especially.
Yeah, echoing the last sentence you said as well. I mean, and that's not a dig on EG at all. The European RMR is incredibly hard to qualify for. I think there's like 14 spots, and there's probably like 30 teams who would all say like, I have a credible, claim to one of those spots.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, I think there's one thing just to clarify is that EG have never announced actually anything about Masuta, right? Like,
right, they never did.
As far as the public is concerned, beyond the reports which were never verified, their plan was always hexed. And yeah, that's all I know of that situation.
That's all.
So
you can just say you can't talk about it. You don't have to lie.
I didn't say anything. But just going back to Neelan, I think I don't know anything about the guy. Like I actually have no idea about his leadership style or anything like that. But what I do know and what I do remember a lot is that Simon Gaming, the team he was in, before they became K23, which I think was a continuation. I think they like rebranded or renamed the organization to the old like legendary Kazakhstani team name. But that team was always like a solid tier 2 European team. Like they always they switched up their roster a lot of times, but they were always very solid. They got through the CIS minor, I think it was, for Starladder, and I think they did quite well actually. I think they ended up losing to like Furia and a Vanguard, and I think a Vanguard were like, that was the one they came second at, right? So they were obviously on a good form then. So like they were a good team, and they have been a good team for a long time. And I think even this year they've had some pretty like solid results in terms of like, online tournaments and things like that. So like I think he'll definitely bring a solid level of experience in European meta to the team. So I think that's going to be a pretty significant upgrade to them. I do think that you're again, knowing nothing about the guy, you might be right in saying that if he's not like a super vocal guy, he's working with a lot of guys who perhaps, at least from my experience with some of them, are not the most vocal. They're not the kind of the guys who are going to take control, take command. So if he's not that guy as well, then they may have an issue there. But I certainly think they're going to be a lot better than they were the first half of this year, and I think they're a much more significant threat to my team, for example.
Well, I think it's funny with how EG is, right? I think of Automatic as a much more stronger personality, someone that is a little bit more headstrong, of knowing what they want, knowing how they want the team to be, the formation, having been there since Cloud9, being through so many different iterations, even going to Valorant and coming back. Like, he seems like a very a strong-headed individual. Well, this isn't to say that it's bad. It's just that's how it is. Bree is, we all know, is very quiet. Zerk as well, very shy. And now you're bringing in Hex, who's never really competed at this tier 1 level. And even when I talked to him at last year's Frag, like, he isn't a guy that is necessarily, I think, super, super comfortable voicing his opinions under such an environment. So all of this feels like Neelan is going to have to come in and be super vocal, which now we can even think about the language barrier, right? That's going to be hard. Trying to, everything in his head is going to be Kazakhstani. He's got, or Russian, or, whatever other language he speaks. He's trying to convey that into English and doing it in a high pressure environment like PG, which is going to have a lot of pressure. A lot of the community I think for better or worse, focuses on EG. We see EG as like it's become a punching bag almost, and I think an unfair punching bag for a lot of things that they've done. And I don't know. I just think that this is going to be an environment that, with it so close to Blast, with it so close to the open qualifiers that they'll have to run through, and they'll only get 2 bites at the apple, like it's going to be tough, right? Because what they'll have to be one of 4 teams to qualify. Same as you. They'll have to, you guys. So there's only going to be out of the.
We're playing the first qualifier.
You're playing the what?
We're playing the first qualifier.
Dude,
it's the major. We're not missing out a single opportunity to qualify for that.
I thought it was on the travel day, though. I thought the Sunday final was on the travel day.
Play on the plane.
Let me say, there are multiple reasons as to why we are playing and why we can play. And we have had to shift a few things with Blast, namely one piece of Media Day. The Media Day for Group B is 1 day later than the Media Day for Group A. So by putting us in Group B, Blast gave us 1 extra day, which means that we can play the final on the 17th, travel on the 18th, do some of our media on the 19th, and then play on the 20th. So we are going to be jet lagged to crap when we get to Blast, but the opportunity to play the major is more important than the first games of the best of ones. Essentially, they're seeding matches for Blast anyway. Like the real stuff starts a week later. You know, you can still get through to the finals by winning 2 games after that. So it's for us, the opportunity to qualify for the major is not something that we're going to risk, losing 33% of our chances. So
does that mean Evil Genius is in Group C? So does that mean that their media day is a day later, so that they'll still be able to play?
So logically, their media day should be on the 20th. So I think they want to get a kickstart in Europe. I think they're going to Europe. But we're going to play. We're going to stay in North America to begin with, and then travel to Blast. And then, the grand idea is that we qualify through the first qualifier. We go to Blast. Whatever happens at Blast is whatever. But then, because we then don't have to go back to North America to play the qualifiers, we then have 2 weeks before our EPL group where we can stay in Europe and work on EPL.
Okay.
So there's pros and cons to both, right? We're sort of taking a gamble and saying we're going to smash the first qualifier, not have to go back to North America after Blast, stay in Europe to handle EPL, and then if we stay for playoffs, and then wherever the RMR is, the RMR, and then depending on what the rest of our schedule is, either we have to go back to North America to play Blast Showdown, or we don't, and then we go to Rio. Like it's.
This is going to be an intense 2 months for you guys, essentially.
It's going to be intense for everyone.
Yeah.
European teams get it a lot easier because they don't have to do all the transatlantic travel. They just travel to Blast, they travel home, they play online. Everyone gets it nice and easy. But for the North American teams, it's going to be a really brutal sort of 2.5 months going from NA to Europe, back to NA, back to Europe, back to NA to Rio. So we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. So we're hedging our bets and saying, let's smash the first qualifier, get it done out the way. EG aren't there, so we can't get like a random slip up. And then, I don't even know how they'd seed it. I don't even know if EG would be the number 2 seed. I'm sure we'd be the number 1 seed, but I don't know who the number 2 seed would be.
Well, remember last time, wasn't it Face It Elo, which determines...
Yeah. No. That
it was like the top 8 teams or something, wasn't it? And then it was Face It Elo.
That was also PGL. ESL obviously had the ESL World Ranking, so they might do something different, and it'll be run on ESEA rather than Face It as well.
I think they should use the Dust 2 US Power Rankings. Yeah. I agree.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure which teams are even playing in North America. Because last time Godsent played NA, and they didn't qualify. But I believe Zero and Nation are playing South America. So
they're doing it in front of a live studio audience as well.
That's really cool.
They're setting up a thing in Sao Paulo. They're hosting an event. They're charging people to come in, but it's supposed to be for the qualifiers. They're going to do all day things like come in. This is going to be a whole watch party essentially, as everyone's going to be competing online.
We were going to do that with North during the online era. We were going to invite people down to the local LAN center that was underneath the stadium where we played in, and we were going to play live in front of the stadium for like EPL matches. Like
that's pretty cool.
Do like 5 days in a row, best of 3s, win or lose. Just have people watch and interact. And we never got around to it because it was still very much sort of the height of COVID in 2020, so it didn't quite pan out. But we were planning it, and I think it could have been cool. But I love the idea.
No ideas like that then for Complexity?
Given the situation we're in right now, so hallzerk is applying for a P1 visa, so he can't enter the US until we've got that fixed up. So certainly not right now. We're not going to plan that. But the Complexity headquarters is opening up, I think, to the public soon, if it isn't already open. So
they hosted some Tim the Tatman event there.
That was nearby, but the actual headquarters has like a public area as well. I can't confess to know too much about the whole situation there because I've only been there like twice. But they certainly have like a public area of like free gaming and like things like that. So it might be possible that we can do public viewing or like a public audience for things in the future. But ideally in the future we're not playing anything online. So
ideally
in the future.
Well, listen, if you have to, we'll see if we can come down. Maybe do a live show and you guys doing there. We should also talk a little bit more about Evil Genius losing of Rush. I thought this was actually a very interesting move. I think it was like it's been reported like almost for months now, kind of when the first debacle of Stewie was happening, that Rush was going to be on his way out. I don't necessarily agree with the decision. Graham, obviously you worked with the guy when he was part of the Juggernaut project, right? How much overlap was there?
He was confirmed to be on the way out before I officially started.
Okay.
But I have had conversations with him because he was obviously still signed after I joined, and with the issues we had with config breaking his wrist and stuff like that. We talked about stuff, but I can't confess to say I've ever worked with him. But I mean, I've known him for a long time from last times, ESL times, stuff like that. So it's I really like the guy. I can't say anything bad about him, but I can't confess to know anything about how he works within a team or anything like that. So
all right, then Liam, it's our turn. We get to talk about how widely speculate how players go. Good decision, bad decision to remove Rush. My opinion.
Good decision if they do what I think they'll do. Like they've lost Hex for the CD one. I think Rush could do a good job. Like they're all young guys in that CD team. Like I think like the oldest one is like 21, and like there's some like 18, 19-year-olds on that team. I think Rush, major winner. He's like been playing for years. Like there's a reason that Jason obviously wanted to keep him on for that Juggernaut team or like bring him in for it. I think he could bring something in terms of experience and helping those guys kind of get used to like playing on bigger stages wherever they do end up playing. I don't know what the plan is with that CD team. Like, I feel like it made a lot of sense to see them go into WePlay, but we obviously didn't see them announced as part of the teams. Whatever happened there, I don't know. I think that would have made sense. But if you add Rush to that team, I think it kind of brings something in terms of experience and not so much in the sense of firepower, but we lost messioso.
We just lost Graham for some reason.
He's back.
No, I agree. I think that Rush has been a good guy, and I think it'll also be interesting now that Stanislaw is coming back to Evil Geniuses, not for the main team, but for the CD team. He's replacing Classia, who admitted that he was removed because of personality issues. Graham, how often are these personality issues an actual issue in NA and preventing young, great talents from actually getting to this next level?
Not really something I can comment on. I mean, I've only been working with the NA teams for 6 months, 7 months. So certainly it's not something that we're experiencing with our team.
Okay.
Our team has a very good mix of personalities. We don't really have any, outsiders or any troublemakers, at least from a personality perspective. Well, no troublemakers in general. I phrased that wrong.
Oh, really? No troublemakers in general? You have Floppy on your team. Have you forgotten?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
What's wrong with Floppy, dude? He's like glue. He's just like super chill. He gets on with everyone. He makes everyone laugh.
He's a character. We all love Floppy in this house. I'm just saying, he's a character.
Totally, yeah.
But yeah, I think Stanislaw coming into the CD team is interesting. I unclear who asked him how he was really being brought on. I heard it wasn't really an Evil Geniuses directed decision. It was just kind of something that the team wanted to do, and they saw him. So seems like he's going to come in, and this could be a chance for him to revitalize his career, or it's a chance for him to help NA out even more. Either way of teaching these young guys and helping them grow up, because as much as we can say that he hasn't necessarily reached the highs that we wish he has in recent years, he definitely is one of NA's most decorated IGLs, and him signing on to this team is I think, helpful to bring up younger players.
I think it's a really good idea. I think a good example would be like look at footballers when they soccer players. Sorry, North
Oh, you
American.
can say footballers. Come on, I got
Yeah.
I got.
Look how like the 34, 35-year-olds when they're in and around the squad, they may not be playing every single game every single week, but they're there to mentor the young players. They're there to develop them. They're there to set the standard. Like this is how good you have to be to play on this team, right? So I think bringing in a guy like Stanislaw, who I think he's known to be quite like a vocal guy, quite an outspoken guy. He expects the best of everyone. I think if you bring that kind of attitude and it's in the right way, obviously I can't confess to say he does it in the right way or the wrong way, but if it comes in the right way, I think you can take that and you can elevate the players who you say like if I don't know the players too well, but if they are young enough to play the We Play Academy League, then they've got maybe 2 or 3 years left of like proper development in before they're sort of considered sort of approaching their peak. 2 or 3 years under Stanislaw might be exactly what they need to develop into to top level professionals. So I think it's a really smart move from both Stanislaw's perspective, given the opportunities he probably had, knowing that if we weren't an option, Liquid wasn't an option, EG is kind of the only place left.
Yeah.
I think from his perspective to get onto a team and, if he elevates them to a point where EG start going, okay, well, we have to start considering him for the main team. He's still got that option within, but also, he needs to be playing. I think one of the biggest issues with players when they get benched or when they, go free agents is that they don't play. Some of them just sit there and think, oh, I'll get an offer. And, I think that there's only so long you can sit without playing before you fade into irrelevancy. And just look at the list of EU free agents that are out there right now that just haven't played in. Like everyone's like, oh, Denmark could create like 3 teams out of all the players who are free agents. Well, why aren't they making teams? Why aren't they playing?
Valde.
Last time was like Hyenas, right? Like that Hyenas team that came around, which was like basically the former North players. Right. They tried to create a team, but beyond that, like I haven't seen anything. And like JW and Flusher, for example, they did the opposite, right? They created eyeballers. They're like, hey, we want to play, we want to get ourselves out there again. So they did something about it. But if you don't do anything about it, like teams aren't just going to come around and pick you up because of what you did 6 months ago, 7-8 months ago. Not unless you're like exceptional or there's some exceptional circumstances. Perhaps JKS is an example of someone who perhaps was getting to the point where he was about to enter that period, but obviously because of his legacy and how long he's been around the game, and also the stand-in period of phase, he got out of that happy days. But it's it's a very easy path to just fade into obscurity, I think, and especially with the lack of investment that's coming in right now into CS. You run the risk very quickly if you don't make something for yourselves that you're just going to end up with nothing.
Yeah, I think for Stanislaw, he was playing on that B-Hop team, which was his, I think, a bunch of friends and things like that. But I get your point stands there. Now we can also talk about another. There's just so many stuff about EG. Their new coach, Vorborg. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and they're not necessarily so kind of. To be perfectly honest.
Okay.
I think it's and Liam, need your thoughts here as well. We've let Graham talk too much. He needs to shut up for a little bit. Vorwerg was a co-owner of Flames, and he was a sometimes head coach of Flames. And Flames got a very respectable position at the last major. I don't see they're apparently EG is also bringing back Malik. They're already brought back Hepa. Evie apparently screwed himself because he decided to talk publicly about the Stewie situation. So he could have been, everyone could have come back, but I guess EG was like, fuck off for causing that unnecessary drama. If you're in talks with Malik for him to come back, I just don't see why you don't push harder on that compared to Vorborg, who does not have necessarily the same accolades as a head coach, who does not have the same history and strength as a head coach. And this seems to just kind of be a new adventure for him. I struggle here when I look at the pressures that EG is going to be under. They have to make the major. They have to qualify. They can't keep finishing last in any of these events. Why are you choosing Vorborg over any list of coaches that are out there that have a better pedigree?
I think, yeah, I kind of agree with your point that I don't think Vorborg kind of stands out to me as one of the names that EG needed to push on this lineup, especially helping out a young IGL like Nealon. Like he is a pretty young guy. Like I think he's 21. He's not exactly been around for ages, so I think he could have done with a Malak. If you bring him back, Stewie's gone. That's appeared to be the issue. Why
Yeah.
don't you? Why don't you bring him back? He's still on the books, unless you've burnt that bridge so bad. But we hear that there are talks to bring him back in another capacity, which I don't get why you would. Vorborg, I'm not too sure about him as a coach. I know that like he did a great job with Flames in terms of like how he managed them, but bring him in as a manager then. Don't
Yeah.
bring him in as a coach. Like you have Malik on the books. I don't get this.
It seems out of left field. It seems like they're kind of going on a flyer here. I think that I'm going to make Vorborg come in and be our next guest as an interviewee. Like, it's maybe if EG ever lets one of their players also talk to us, this is also a public plea. EG, please let your players talk to us. I would like to talk with them and do interviews. Content is important. But yeah, I just think that it's such a wild pick that I can't get behind it purely from the competitive standpoint. I don't mean anything bad to Vorborg. I think he's a great guy. I think he's incredibly smart. I think when I had a conversation with him as the head coach of Flames, it was great. I just am confused as to why him over a lot of others, and I think that's a question that NA fans need to hear the answer to. Okay, now we should really dedicate time to talking about complexity. Even though Graham, you've wanted
Here we go.
and kept injecting about it. All right, you're on. First thing that we got to do. What are you going to do, and what have you already done to stop the skid?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Okay. This is the place.
Yeah, baby. I think the first thing that I like to do is actually just look at the matches we lost.
Okay.
And sort of, there are a few matches in there that we, I think in our minds we say we should have won those games. Losing to Sinners with a coach. That's very disappointing, right? Obviously, we lost to MIBR in a best of one on Nuke with a coach. That was disappointing. But then you look at the other games, outsiders at the major, the best of one. We actually felt like we could have won that game. We kind of threw some pretty important rounds to like 4 Tech 9s and an AWP or something stupid. We lost on an anti-eco, and Liquid in a best of 3 at the major. Domestic matchup. Liquid probably are the better team. Arguably going into that, we were probably the underdogs. NIP probably the underdogs. OG with their new roster, probably a close game, but probably still considered the underdogs.
Yeah, it was you got
Cloud9 underdogs, Astralis underdogs, Team Spirit underdogs, Astralis underdogs. So, obviously I want to win these games. Like we don't go into these games saying, "Oh, we're the underdog, so it's okay to lose."
Right.
But it's not like outside of 2 of the games we had on whatever there's the 10 or 11 losing streak, it's not like we massively underperformed in those games. So it's tough and it sucks, and we're all well aware that it sucks, and we don't like losing, right?
Yes.
It sucks to lose, but when you look at the reason we were able to lose those games is because we actually won the games to qualify for those events. In the most case, right? We won the qualifier for Dallas, or we got through the qualifier for Dallas. We got through the qualifier for the major, and we qualified for Cologne by getting enough points. Obviously, invite to Dubai, that's great. Rubet, everyone played. So there's a mixture of qualification and not, but like, this team hasn't been to all those big events, in its sort of extra salt capacity, right? Not on a consistent level. So it's still a step up to even be participating in those events on the most part. If you consider this our first season with this team,
right,
it's still a bit of a step up in terms of like, consistently going to these events, playing on LAN. Fang and Junior had never played on a proper LAN before this start of this year.
Yeah.
Their first LAN event was at Pro League in March. That was the first time they ever actually sat down, set up on like a internet restricted computer. There wasn't like BYOC or like Fragadelphia, and played like top level, top 5 in the world teams in that environment.
Yeah.
So if 2 of your 5 players are starting from that level, not in terms of like, not to say that's a bad thing, but like, we've got a long way to go still in terms of our development. And I think it's key to put the perspective in the way that we are looking at this team as a team that is going to develop over time. We didn't build this team or put together this team to go, okay, we're going to be top 15 within 2-3 months. So it was always going to be like, we need to take this slowly. Being a North American team is extremely hard. Liquid did the best out of all of us, but they still didn't exactly excel this season. With a few good results here and there, right. But they didn't exactly blow everyone's brains out, right? So I think they ranked like 15 or 14 right now. Like it's not like they're doing crazy well. So
to be fair, technically they only have 4 players listed on their HLTV roster. So.
But that's their core, right? That's their core of their players. So I think that's a fair representation. If you add whatever one player it is, I mean, technically he did get the Cologne. Was it semifinals they made or quarterfinals they made? It's worth something. But that's one event from one player. It's not going to move them from 14 to 10 or 9. Like it's going to be very minimal. So
in terms of the kind of mood that was in the team towards the end. When I was talking to the guys when you guys were in Cologne, it seemed very kind of down. Like it just seemed so dismal in the camp. How long did that kind of go on for before Cologne? Because like Cologne was obviously the end of the season, and you kind of like DC said to us that we expected changes, but
yeah, I think the point where the mood really started to drop was probably around about the Blast Showdown, maybe a few days before Blast Showdown. So we traveled to Pro League. We played Pro League. We then stayed in.
So this is even before the major.
This is like literally like the week and a half before the major is when we had a few players really start to experience some symptoms of burnout.
Yeah.
So we started to literally put the brakes on, took a huge halt. We had to play the Blast Showdown, and then people were like, "Oh, why didn't you fly to Europe the day after the Blast Showdown like Liquid and Fjærli did?" I mean, honestly, like people needed time off, people needed break days, so we didn't even practice like those 3 or 4 days. We just took some time off. We just tried to manage things as best we could. But I think going there and then into the major, obviously, which is where this giant losing streak happened. So you go from being burnt out, winning 1 game in the major, into 11 series losing streak. It's very hard to pick yourselves up from that point. It's very hard to make put a flag in the sand and say this is where we change things. Obviously we did our best, but after the major I think we had like a full week and a half off. But then we're playing Dallas, so for us especially, we want to try and make the crowd in Dallas, it's essentially our home event from complexity, from an organizational perspective. So we didn't want to take too much time off, but we wanted to try and make sure that we could manage the players as best we could. So we did what we thought was best. And obviously there's a fine line between performance from a mental perspective and also from an in-game perspective. And we probably didn't find that in the end, but I think it's hard to know exactly where that is. And then then we went straight to Dubai from Dallas, and then we went from Dubai into a 3-week boot camp in Serbia, and then went to Cologne. And that's another for players that are already beginning to struggle with burnout. It's a lot to do, so we had to manage the time really effectively and make sure we had appropriate days off, and we managed our practice schedule. So even though we were in Europe for 3 weeks, it wasn't like we were grinding out crazy amounts of practice and individual games every day, because we still had to manage those problems. So it was a tough season. It's a very long season. And, when you have to travel transatlantic every single time to play all these events, it's not super easy. And I think
I will say I have to sympathize, because after doing 2 weeks in Antwerp, my body was wrecked, just physically. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I need to eat a salad and have vegetables and stop getting takeout from around the corner. This is awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can agree. I can understand where you're coming from with that. It is tough.
Being on the road is tough. So yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to not make this sound like excuses, but more just set the scene for what we were dealing with. Because ultimately, it's not like we were alone in facing these struggles. Liquid, Furia, they also have similar issues, and if they can overcome it, then that's then we need to figure out.
Liquid and I think a good comparison here though is that Liquid and Furia have been doing this for years. They've been at that top international level. They know what they're doing. They're used to this. They know what they need to do. Like at the major, Furia had their nutritionist and like guy who's going to be like, this is what we're going to eat today. We're going to make sure that we're getting our right macros and our right diet. Like they have an incredible support system behind it because they've done this for so long. They know what they need. You're inexperienced. It happens. Moses, I think, had a couple of tweets after the whole Shocks tweet longer, where it basically was like, you guys don't understand. It's hard. It's really hard to do it. And I think that, we're going to sit here and we have to criticize, obviously, but I think there is part of that we acknowledge, it's really tough to be traveling and doing all this. Europeans automatically have it easier because they can play from home. They can take a train ride back to wherever, like to Sweden or Germany or France. It's not going to be as hard compared to being on the road, of being away and having all of that. So
I think I think a good analogy, like I've been getting into Formula One a lot in the last few years, and they say that you can only really compare one driver against another driver when it's within the same team, right? Because they're using the same machinery, same car, same general overall kind of feeling. So when I try and figure out like, hey, are we like massively underperforming, or are we sort of where I think we should be, or how are things going? I look at Liquid, look at Furia, and I think Furia dropped off quite a bit towards the end of this year.
They have
at the end of the season. Liquid have had I think they made playoffs in Pro League, and they made playoffs in Cologne, but then between that,
that was it. Yeah,
they got through the first stage of the major, but then bombed out 0-3. Like it's not like, aside from those two big results, and obviously Furia had, I think, do they have a big result at the start of the year? I can't even remember.
Top 4 Pro League.
Yeah, and top 4 at Dallas as well, I think. So
yeah.
So aside from they made the
top 8 of the major.
Yeah. So Fury have had some pretty good results, but towards the end, like the very end, they dropped off a bit. But I also expect them to be doing better than us in the current scenario. So when I put us up against them, I don't feel like we're super far away from where we should be. But at the same time, out of those 10 games that we lost, I would like to say that out of one of every 10 games, we should have converted those into a win. And I feel like there were definitely games or series where we should have won and didn't, and that's obviously disappointing. But it doesn't feel like we're super far away from where we need to be or where we should be in relation to the to the region we're from and the problems we face and everything else. So I think it's a very, how to say, very complex, no pun intended at all, very complex issue, because obviously, you've got to take everything into a fact of, people like, you should have changed Junior earlier. It's like, okay, let's take that as an example. We obviously look at stuff like that, and it's not like there was no action at all.
Right. I think we did. I forget who we did the interview with, but it basically was like, we've changed positions so much. You guys changed all the positions.
I think might have been Fang, I think, recently did an interview for that.
But it was the idea of like, Junior has been paired up with different people. The whole team has been changing tactics to try and figure out how can they make it work. And and there was like a concerted effort, at least from our understanding, that you guys really did try and figure out exhaust all possible options before you had to make a roster change, which I think is always the right solution. You should figure out if the team dynamics first can be altered, and then you can look for outside help.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Junior came into the team, essentially he was joining into a well-established role, which was OC. OC had been with that roster, that team for many, many years, as far as I can tell, like at least a year and a half or 2 years. With
he's
JT,
part of
I
that
think,
Cloud9 with Floppy.
So,
and
even going back to like ATK when they played like Pro League in 2019, right? So like he's been in that role for a long time. So, first of all, that role was kind of built around him. So so Junior has to adapt to that first thing. Then we have to figure out, okay, this isn't working. How can we make it work? There's multiple iterations of that. Obviously, there was a point where we sort of came together with Junior and said like, hey, right now we're not happy with the performance that's coming in. We're well aware that there are other issues around the team that we also need to resolve. But we sort of highlighted that he had something in particular, and we gave him some things to work on, and we gave him some time to work on that. I think it's important that coaching comes from a perspective of the player has to be made fully aware of the things that we want to see improved, and then they have time to make the improvement. And Payan worked very hard, and he made some improvement. But ultimately, when we got to the point of the end of Cologne, we had an opportunity to with the player break to make a change, and we elected to do that. And it's not something that's nice or enjoyable, but I think with the amount of changes we made and the amount of different setups we tried, and ultimately we were able to make it work. The only result of that was to make a change. So
there are two things I kind of want to jump in. Liam,
sure.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off as I'm asking questions here. I'm kind of leaving you out. Go right ahead, man.
What I was going to say was, you said there OC spent so long with that roster, and Junior was coming in to kind of fill in for OC. With hallzerk now coming in, is that like more of a stylistic match towards OC, would you say, or was it just we need to go completely different here?
I would say more of a stylistic match, yes. hallzerk had a lot more of the qualities that we were looking for in terms of, I guess. I don't want to go too in deep into it because I don't think it's fair to everyone involved. But like there was a few sort of key things that we believe are necessary for the player in the AWP role within the system that we have, and of the players that we worked with and looked through and scouted and trialed. Eventually, hallzerk was the player that we felt matched up best to the system that we were trying to create, or the system that we the system we want to run, the system we feel comfortable running. So that was ultimately where it came from, yeah.
So with hallzerk, was one of the many buying points his mullet?
I mean, I'm a huge fan. I've got the long hair as well.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I'm very curious here. Like, is this going to be a new thing? Like, can we get some more? We did some merch, stylerized floppy. Can't stop the flop. Are we going to get some like mullet gang merch here? Like, do I need to like grow out something here to like if I support NA, like I have to be growing out mullets?
And you got to get the sunglasses as well.
Oh, got it. Okay. How about this? Yeah. I'll make you this promise. You make it to top 8 at the major, I will 100% grow out a mullet. That's gonna be my deal with you.
We'll take that bet. You didn't say which major. You just said the major. So, if it's an unlimited time period, we'll take that bet.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So with hallzerk, obviously new team coming in. You're saying that he's not even in America yet because he's got to apply for this P1 visa. So what's the expectations that you're going to have right now? Like how is he going to play for the open qual? How is he going to like, do we think he'll be here in time?
Yeah. He's gonna, well, obviously he's not going to be on the P1 visa in North America, in the USA. Right. He won't get that in time. But obviously the same way that Brazilians play in North America from Mexico, we can do the same thing. So he'll be in North America, but he won't be with the rest of the team.
Understandable.
In fact, the majority of the players will still be at home. Trying to again preserve as much time off as possible. So the only players that will be in the headquarters in Dallas, at least. I don't know if they'll be necessarily the headquarters. They might play from their apartments, but it's essentially the same thing.
Don't let Floppy play from Oregon.
It will be Floppy and JT. Obviously, JT can't play from South Africa. And,
that's a little hard. Yeah.
And Floppy can't play from Portland because his ping and connection sucks. So, So Grim will be at home. Bang will be at home. hallzerk will be in Mexico. The other guys will be in Dallas, and I think TC actually might still be in South Africa for the qualifiers because, the coach can't even join the qualifiers. So,
really.
There's literally no point in him even.
Maybe what we'll do is for the open qualifiers, we'll actually get TC to come onto the live watch party. That way we can make sure for Valve there is absolutely no chance of any collusion, any talking. We'll make sure we're on the straight and narrow here. So
you'll have to ask him.
Just what I'm not
going to mandate that. You'll have to ask him.
Oh, come on, man. Fine, I'll ask him. It'll
TC likes me. We had a good talk at Cologne. So I'm sure we can organize it.
Everyone has a good talk with TC. That guy can talk to anyone. We always sit him in the front of the taxi. Every single taxi we get into, TC sits in the front because he will talk to every single driver and like make us friends. And then he'll come out of the taxi and be like, "Oh yeah, no, I talked to the taxi driver, and he gave me the list of like this like really cool list of all like these really cool clubs and bars and shisha places, and he said that there's a really good restaurant like just down this road." And honestly, he talked to anyone and just gets like the best out of everything.
I love it. All right. Well, for everyone that's in chat, make sure you're asking your questions right over into the chat box. We're going to be doing the AMA just after this last question. So we're going to make sure that we're doing that. We're filtering them out. We've got our producer Martin is on the hunt, so we'll be asking those questions. I guess the last point that I got to say here is JKS still technically part of the Complexity organization for now. Congrats on moving on. All right, is that in order yet? No official announcement has been made, so I don't want you to put your foot in your mouth.
No official announcement has been made. So for now, he remains a Complexity player until we say so otherwise.
Understandable there.
If I could ask one more question as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
In terms of talking to Junior when I interviewed him, we obviously know what he went through in terms of the media, the fans just blatantly bashing on him for this entire season. And he's a young guy. He seemed really nice, from when I got to talk to him. What can you kind of say about his mood after you guys kind of had your talk? And do you think he's going to be able to bounce back in another NA team or go somewhere else? Or
I think he can. I think he obviously, this is my opinion of the situation, but based on the body language and the talks I've had with him, he wants to play Counter-Strike. He believes he can play Counter-Strike at a top level. And to be honest, I don't doubt him. I think for us, he wasn't the right player to fit the system that we had and the other players that we have. And I think, for example, not to put any feet in anyone's mouth or anything, but I think he'd be a really good player that could play on one of the EG rosters, for example. I don't think that either of those EG rosters is necessarily, brimming with AWP talent. I think that he potentially could be a player that could fit onto one of those rosters. And given the time and the development under a coach who can give them, the time that I assume those two teams will have, I think that he's someone that could really flourish on those rosters and build up the confidence, build up the gameplay to a point where he could then re-enter the tier one. I think the biggest issue, with us for that perspective is that we want to move quicker than that, and that's ultimately what led to the change. If we said, okay, we have 2 years to do this, and I think we can stay with that. But I think, not to say that it'll take 2 years. That's don't misquote me on that, please, guys. But you know what I mean. I think
you can make sure you get the contact.
I think he's someone who just needs a bit more time in the right environment. And I just don't think that we were giving him the right environment because of the goals and the timeline that we have to achieve those goals, or where we want to be in the next few months. So, I think he's the kind of guy that could drop down and sort of reinvent himself and not come back stronger, because that's a meme, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it's great that you guys kind of envision that for him, that it's not based off of talent. It's kind of just, this wasn't the right fit, and maybe his performance definitely suffered because of that. He's not the operator that you needed, and trying to have him in certain roles where he wasn't the most comfortable.
Yeah, I think there's also a point where it's very hard to dig yourself out of a hole once the hole sort of is there, because you're trying so hard to focus on the situation that you can't get out of it. And I think, obviously, he got vilified from day one for that 50-50 quote, right? And I personally think, I can't speak for him obviously, but I think that quote was taken a little bit out of context, because I think
no.
Okay, so let me explain the context that I think it was meant in, because I also believe at that time that I could have said the same quote and would have believed it, right? That I think at that time, which was mid-January, early February, I think it was in the build-up towards Katowice, or maybe during Blast. I think that at that point, if we had played Liquid one-on-one, I think that it would be a very 50-50 game. And, we beat them 16-14 in the RML qualifier, which was essentially a meaningless seeding game, and actually probably was better if you lost it in hindsight, because of the way the seeding worked in the RMR with the Swiss system. Being the number 1 seed actually was worse for you than being the number 6 seed or something. But anyway, and then we lost 16-12, 16-12 to them in the major. So it's not like it was blowouts either way, right? But on the flip side, I think that at the point where that quote was made against international competition, I think Liquid were a lot ahead of us. So I think in terms of the direct matchup, I think it was a lot closer than how we would have performed against top level international competition. So I think that the quote in his mind was made more about like who's the best out of NA. If it was up against, just like EG versus Liquid versus Complexity, I think it was like, it was more like a 50-50 on that sense, rather than if Liquid play heroic or we play heroic, it's either of us could win or either of us could lose. I think there was more of a difference in that level. So yeah, I feel bad for the guy. I really do.
It was just too perfect a quote though. Like it was so memeable, and it's sad, but I think he had a couple of cases where things were taken out of context, and I did feel bad for him in that sense, because like when I took him for the interview in Cologne, I could see him thinking, and I was like, you're just definitely thinking, how can I word this so it's not taken out of context? So
yeah, definitely. It's
right.
It's tough. I think he had a really tough position, and obviously when in the scenario that he was in, where all the pressure was on him, people were asking him, people wanted to talk to him about how he was doing and how things were going in the team. It just led to the more and more interviews and more quotes being taken out of context, or maybe misquoted, or not misquoted, but like, it was a very slippery slope, I think. And obviously it's very hard, as I said, is once the hole is there, it's very hard to dig yourself out of it when you're trying so hard to dig yourself out of it that you end up digging it even deeper, I think. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna start off with some of the viewer questions here now. So from Powerful JDS, what stood out about hallzerk? His gameplay or his mullet? And also, has the team's consumption of ketchup increased?
I mean, obviously, right now we haven't restarted for the season. We had a small kickoff meeting on Monday just to talk about a few things, go through the schedule, expectations, things like that. But as of right now, we have not spoken about ketchup. And I am expecting everyone to grow a mullet for the rest of this year.
Oh my god! Please.
Yeah. Do you know? I'm actually just glad we have another guy with facial hair, because I feel like. Yeah, I feel like I'm outnumbered on the facial hair with 1 to 5, so I'm glad we got someone else. TC used to have a really good beard, and then he keeps shaving it off. It's just, disappointing.
Yeah.
And the next question that we had was from JPM 2002. He said, "What was the biggest deciding factor with picking up hallzerk?"
Biggest deciding factor with picking up hallzerk was definitely the way he fit in with us during the trials. We played a few games. So immediately following our elimination from Cologne, we held some trials in Europe while we were in Europe, because it obviously made sense ping-wise, practice-wise to do that. And he really impressed us in-game with the way he played, called his game, called for other people, utility, everything else. Like it was extremely good, again, for the system that we wanted to run, even though it was very puggy. We didn't have strats here. There was no kind of there's no method to the madness, but the way he played based on that loose sort of game type, really worked well with us and impressed us. So that was the main thing for us.
So when looking for talent to replace Junior, was the focus primarily on an EU opper who was up to date on the meta, or were there any looks at any of the South American players? And that comes from Xeranis.
The focus was on North American players. And we looked at we were like, being realistic, we have pretty extensive lists to replace every single player on the roster.
Which I think is which I'm shocked that like not many organizations have had that, of like these backup lists of like, who would you need to get in case, like, who knows, like another team comes in and is like, we'll give you $5 million for floppy. Like, of course you're going to say yes, and you're going to need your backups. You can't be scrambling.
If they give you $5 million, I mean, no, yeah. So we have to plan 1 or 2 iterations ahead of time in terms of what we think is realistic. So we have to start. We don't want to be in a position where someone comes in, as you say, offers a lot of money for a player during a player break, and then we go, okay, well, we can't turn that down. We don't want to then be doing 2 weeks of research into how we're going to replace that player. We have to be prepared for that. And, we've been preparing for that for, many months now. So we were primarily looking at North American players. This team is a North American team. We want to remain a North American team. We have no interest in becoming a mixed European team, anything like that. So we spent a lot of time looking at the North American talent out there, and ultimately decided that to try and make the changes necessary to become the sort of to match the development timeline that we want to have right now, we had to look elsewhere. So then we sort of said, okay, if we can't be a North American full team, maybe we can be an American or an America's team. So then we started looking at South America and began to create a list there of who may be available, who may not be available, and who may fit the system, who doesn't fit the system. And obviously there's a lot of players out there that have been switching a lot recently among the Brazilian teams anyway.
Nathan, which, by the way, shocking, like we can get into it kind of after this, but I want to ask him, I mean, I thought that was an interesting one.
Yeah. So obviously, and one of the biggest issues there is, how many of them speak English, and that's another issue on itself. So there's a lot of challenges that come with that, and I think comms is one thing that when you have 4 fully native English speakers, South Africa, Canada, Canada, and
wow,
and the United States.
Jet already started. He hasn't taken off.
Canada.
And the United States. Obviously, I think comms is very different to those players versus, let's say, a FaZe Clan, because they have 5 or 4 now, I suppose, because they have twists. They used to always run on 5. I mean, they're probably the only team that has actually got 1 native English speaker in them, but they've always typically run with non-native English speakers. So I think the way that they can notice perhaps the deficiencies of their communications is perhaps lower, because they're not all fully native and fluent themselves. They struggle to maybe notice the difference. So it's more acceptable to have slightly worse English communications. Whereas I think when you have a team full of fully native speakers, having one guy who's maybe not quite up to speed is a lot more noticeable, perhaps. So at least that's my perception of it, at least. So I think we didn't want to be in a position where we had one guy who felt very out of the group, both from a social standpoint and from an in-game standpoint, unless their English was really good. So that was definitely something that was on our minds when we looked at South American players, and we looked very extensively at South American players, and we made a lot of inquiries to find out a lot more about the players that we were interested in. Asked lots of their former teammates, how good's their English? Had they spoken English before? Truly tried to paint a picture of who these guys were, and ultimately we didn't. Nothing matched up in terms of availability, willingness to relocate, willingness to play, and everything else. So that was when we then reframed our focus towards Europe, which was kind of our last resort, in the sense that we wanted to really try and maintain this North American roster to begin with, then sort of lean towards Americas, and then now to Europe. So it's not something that we want to repeat, and I think in the future we will try and maintain that North American core as much as possible. But yeah, ultimately did have to lean towards Europe in this sense, and I think it's a change that will help elevate us. But long-term strategy-wise, it's not something that we want to entertain on a regular basis, because we recognize that there's a certain level of responsibility that we have as a North American organization, a North American team, that we want to actually provide for the North American scene, the North American community, both from a fan perspective, but also from a the players who are up and coming right now. If they don't see the path towards being a pro, then it's very hard to encourage them and to make them, still work hard for that role that may exist in a year, 2 years time, but doesn't exist right now. But if we don't provide them with that sort of pipeline or possibility, prosperity, then it's sort of a wasted opportunity. So yeah, it's very tough, but it's the path we've chosen to go down, at least for now.
So Liam's gonna solve some technical issues that he's got on his end, so I'll ask his question for him. Coming from our own Dustu David, does hallzerk fix any of those communication issues that the roster has had previously, or will this be a longer term goal to fix? I know we touched on it a little bit. It's just for more specification here.
Yeah, so as I said, we played these tryout matches with him, and certainly we were very happy with what he brought in that sense. But I think overall our communication issues are not limited to the alt position, and it's something that as a wider team that we need to resolve. Right. And as I said, we think we've come up with a solution for this upcoming season that will benefit us. other players ultimately need to step up in that sense, and it's it's about finding the right players in the right positions, the right roles. You can't necessarily have the vocal guy being next to the guy that's already very vocal in game, because then you've got two guys who are calling the same stuff, and there's obviously a lot of different swaps you have to make. But I think we've come up with a solution that will work for us, and obviously we now have to go out and try it and iterate and figure out how it's going to work. But yeah, it's definitely not a isolated situation just on the AWP player, and I don't think that's a fair assumption to make, at least.
Okay. Liam, how are you got your tech issues figured out over there?
I think I do have them. I'm back on track.
All right.
Will we keep rolling with the questions? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll do one more, and then we'll just go on to the latest Brazilian news. And I think we've got our shills to show.
All right.
I'm gonna do the one by Vito.
Which one?
The org measures progress.
Yeah, you can ask it. I can't find it.
All right. So basically, Guy Vito says, how is complexity measuring progress within the team? Obviously, they're a young and inexperienced roster, so when you're going into EPL Blast, etc., like how are you tracking that progress? Is it results based? Is it personal performance based? Is there metrics that you can see in game and out of game that you're kind of trying to judge that off?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a set of metrics. I think one of the key things that we had with this roster, moving to the North American space from the European space, the juggernaut, let's say, we have to be qualifying for the major. Not qualifying for the major is a very significant financial loss to the team and the players. So that's kind of like number one. That is a must-have, and if we're not qualifying for the major, that would be seen as an extreme issue,
right,
in my view, and certainly overall with the organization. If you move to a weaker region and expect to be one of the strongest teams in the region, arguably that you would say comfortably one of the stronger teams in the region, then we have to make the major every single time. So that's definitely sort of not point number one. And then from there, it's about, for us, I think it's more about the development of the team. So, we didn't do so well this season in Pro League or Blast. So now it's about, okay, we need to
finish last in Pro League. So,
we didn't finish last, but we also should have made playoffs. So it's,
depends how you want to look at it in terms of success.
Yeah, it's very easy to say if this had happened, then that had happened, and everything else. But you could say that we felt like we should have beaten AGO, and then I think we certainly could have beat Astralis on the final day. I think we lost the series ultimately in the end because ESL, whether they did it in purpose or not, after we got to 1-1 in that game, ESL basically said, "Oh, EG already lost, by the way, so Astralis, you're qualified before you play the third map." And I think at that point, our whole team is just like, well, what the hell's the point? Like when you think you can qualify for playoffs, if EG managed to beat AGO and then EG lose to AGO, and then your third map is essentially a dead rubber to decide nothing for yourselves, then it's very hard to pick yourselves up and win that game. But I think we could have won that game in the third map if we'd sort of gone in.
That's so bizarre that ESL admins would do that.
It wasn't the admins. It was the broadcast. We were on like the B or the C stream, I think.
Right.
And then the EG game finished super quick.
Right.
So they were done.
It was like a quick 2-0.
They were done, and then I think they got the A broadcast. They brought Heku over to our studio, and then did like a little bit right in front of Astralis, being like, I don't know if they can hear me, but EG lost, basically, or something. And then from that point on, they knew that if no matter what the result was in our game, we couldn't qualify. So they Astralis put in third place.
I've got a question. So in terms of that, with map 3,
Sure.
Did JT stop calling at Pro League in front of Jason Lake when he knew that they couldn't qualify?
Okay, so Jason wasn't at Pro League, and no, JT didn't stop calling. The guys gave it everything.
Okay,
from memory, it was a very close game, but I think in the very close games, when you know you're playing for nothing, I think you lose that extra kind of like that last little bit that says like, we're going to push this over the line because if we win this, we go to playoffs. But if you know you're not going to playoffs, it's very hard to. Yeah, we lost 16-14 on Ancient. So
he was definitely calling.
Yes, JT was definitely calling. Yeah, I think that was a bit tough, but like I don't blame anyone for that situation. I think ESL were obviously doing what was best for the broadcast by getting that live reaction, and that was great. But ultimately, if we hadn't heard it, it would have been fine because we wouldn't have known. But because we did hear it, we overheard it as we were walking out the studio, and that kind of then that you have no prospects. It's tough to pick yourself up, and obviously you play for pride, and we wanted. I think we could have finished fourth if we had won that game instead of finishing fifth, but when neither goes to playoffs, it's a tiny bit of prize money and ESL Pro Tour points, which pretty insignificant on the grand scheme of things. So yeah, it is what it is. In an ideal world, I think that wouldn't happen. But I don't blame anyone for it because I think ESL were obviously trying to do what was best for the broadcast and get that kind of show element to it, which is also important. We have to recognize that the product that the tournaments are putting out and the broadcast for the fans is extremely important for that. So I think it's just maybe a misunderstanding or perhaps people didn't realize the potential consequences of it. But ultimately the game was a dead rubber no matter whether they told Astralis or not. So it's it is what it is.
All right, I think that's going to do it here for the AMA. So now we're going to wrap up with the other final news, which should just be some fun stuff here. We've got Sad News Bears. Bad News Bears finally kind of implodes.
Fun stuff, and you immediately go to Bad News Bears.
That's in the sheet. It's in the sheet. I follow a
Don't
sheet.
Don't call
that
it fun stuff then.
It does say Sad News Bears.
Listen.
Yeah, he said sad. He said fun news, and then Sad News Bears.
Anyways. Bad News Bears finally implodes. I guess we've seen it coming. They didn't really do very well in Europe. They didn't do well when they came back. They had this whole boot camp and everything, and they come back and they still are they're going to relegation. It was a tough year. Sheikh Zula is now taking a break. Spongey's taking a break. The Pakistani duo are going to retain the spot for now. Liam, I mean, how much of a cultural death is it for Bad News Bears to kind of be killed at this point?
I think it's pretty sad that we lost Party Astronauts and Bad News Bears as a brand so close together. I think they were two of the really kind of important ones that you could look to in the scene that you were like, okay, there's something positive going on here. We can see what they're trying to build. I think the biggest downfall from this is if Sheikh Zula takes his break and decides not to come back, if the scene isn't in a suitable enough place where he deems it I can actually do something positive here. Because I think he's done so much in recent years. When this roster was put together, it didn't excite me at all because I'm not super well acquainted with the lower levels, advanced and stuff, and below that. I didn't know anything about Pluto and Momo. I knew a little bit about Swan before he came in. That was kind of it. I think that'll be the biggest disappointment from this roster imploding is if Sheikh Zula decides after the break, look, there's nothing here for me. And if he goes to Valorant, if he just leaves esports altogether, I think that'll be the biggest disappointment for NA in general. So,
yeah. I think Sheikh is one of the best amateur IGLs that we've had in North America. He's a brilliant mind. He knows how to play, and he's crafted some amazing players. I mean, Grim, obviously, he's now with you, Graham. But he had his shot on Liquid. Junior as well. He went off to Furia, and then he's gone off. He was just recently with you. And I think there's a lot of other things that can be said for Sheikh Zula and the tree that he's created. So this is definitely a sad time. But now we can get to the stuff that Graham might actually care about.
Hold on. We're talking about tier 2 NA teams who are developing talent. This is literally everything I care about.
Well, what do you think? Thoughts on Sheikh Zula? With him, taking this break and evaluating all of his options. This is a tough moment, I think, for the region. For who we have.
Can't say anything about my personal experiences with him. I think I met him at the RMR. Perhaps I met him at the RMR. Did Bad News Bears make the RMR?
Yeah, that's when they did their boot camp.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I think I met him very briefly or said hi. But certainly from the players that I have who have worked with him or played with him in the past, nothing but positive things to be said about him. So it certainly sounds like if he does choose to not continue in any capacity, then it would be a pretty significant loss to that kind of level. player. Other scenes have players that have been in that position before. People always talk about Hunden, for example, in the Danish scene, when he was sort of like at that tier 2 level before that Mad Lions team really kind of shot off, or the Tricked roster was shot off. Lots of the IGLs, who are at the top of the Danish scene now, have all played with Hunden at some capacity, whether it was in 2014, 15, 16, they've all sort of played with him, or lots of the players have played with him. So, perhaps he has a similar role. Wasn't Ocean? Wasn't he one of the guys that everyone sort of memed? I don't know if it was a meme or whether it was actually true, but like Ocean apparently played with a lot of players, right? So it's like similar kind of vibe I get from that. So whenever you lose a player like that, I think it's a pretty significant sort of detriment to the scene as a whole. So it would be very sad if that was to happen. So here's hoping he finds a way to continue. For my own sake.
All right, let's look at the few Brazilian changes that we've seen here. MIBR is going to bring in Henny because Cello is moving on to Imperial. That I think is a pretty huge move there. Imperial is paying $200,000 for Cello, which wild amount of money I feel like for Cello. I think even Lukosi, who went to Sharks, they paid something like €325,000. Like it's been like there are some major moves that are happening down in Brazil. Payne cutting Nithon, I think, is such a weird move since Nithon has been so strong and has been a great player. And then finally, Furia not making any changes, but also like questioning whether they need to, but just in like a weird like fluke state like of what's going on. So those are 4 major things. Have at it, you two.
I'd say we can probably already start drafting the Lucas to MIBR piece. So, that's more content for us.
The twins cannot be defeated.
Like, can't wait for that roster to have their fun with the twins when he inevitably shows up. No, but all seriousness, I think Henny really needs to do something with this roster. Like, the guy has so much talent, and it's such a shame the way that he left Furia. Like, that roster had so much potential, and it's only now like this season where they kind of really started to recover properly. Like, they were always good, but like I don't think the heights that they hit with Henny, like you could kind of see it with Safe when they made top 4 at Pro League, they made top 4 at Dallas, they made top 8 at the Major. Jumping to the Furia, no changes. I don't think they needed changes. I said it to you when we did the last podcast at Cologne. I was like, I don't think this roster needs changes. I think they need a break. It just looked like they were ready for their break by the time that they were knocked out of Cologne by a liquid with a YEKINDAR. So I don't think they need changes. I think they have a good enough core. I think Art is a good IGL who needs to maybe switch it up a bit or else get back to his proper form, finding impact on the entries, because I think teams kind of figured him out. Whether that's something that they did over the break, I can't really say. Like, I'm not super in with the Brazilians, obviously lack of Portuguese. So Cello to Imperial, I like making it more competitive. I don't like the fact that it's the last dance adding a younger player. It's more like Jordan on the Wizards than Jordan on the Bulls at this point, if you're going to call it a last dance. But I don't know what to think of Imperial. I think Fallen could do something with younger players, which is what I wanted him to do, kind of like the way that Taco and Cold went and took 3 good young players from 0-0 Nation. They showed positive signs, and now they had a break to really work on that. That's what I'd like to see him doing. But look, if you're getting the bag from Imperial for the last dance, then go for Add Cello, see if you can get higher in the rankings and do better at tournaments, because they didn't show me anything from last season, in my opinion. And Payne cutting Nithon, do we know who's replacing Nithon?
Yes, but I cannot remember right now, so I'm hoping Twitch chat can let me know. I've had my mind on lots of other stuff.
Twitch chat, let us know. Because if it's an
upgrade
upgrade
over
overnight,
I say the wrong one, I will always get corrected. So that's always helpful,
I think
Skulls. Oh yeah, it's Skulls, and God, we reported on it. I should know this.
I didn't report it.
We did.
Yeah,
Zevi.
Well,
Zevi. Skulls.
Like, I don't know much about those 2 players. I don't think they're an immediate upgrade over Nithon, whether they see something that they can bring in. But it's not like cutting an already good player. Like, who was it that they cut? Knock for Device. It's not like an obvious, okay, we can get this much better player for an immediate upgrade. But I don't know. Maybe they see something in him. Maybe they've had talks with him that he brings something that Nathan couldn't, that we didn't see behind closed doors. So I can't really comment on it too much because it just seems like a kind of weird move to make at this point.
It could be one of those things, maybe a little bit like what, the classier thing, that perhaps you just don't see from the outside, but then as soon as, it's an internal thing, it's communications, it's attitude, it could be anything, right? It could be lack of wanting to travel, it could be lack of wanting to relocate, like, I don't know, there's so many things that it could be. That you're right, on the face of it, it does seem like a weird move, because I think he was performing very well, and they obviously had a pretty solid uptick in form, around the last showdown and towards the end of the year. So yeah, a bit weird, but could also be that he's getting bought out by another team. Who knows?
That also could be true.
Those damn Brazilian buyouts.
Yeah.
All right, and then any thoughts on Fury not making really any changes at all this offseason?
I think that's fine for them. I don't think they're I don't think they're in a major issue. I think they built a pretty good team. I don't know outside of buying, some of the best players from the other teams, which is obviously a pretty significant financial investment. Which I don't think they can make the changes that you could perhaps theoreticize that would be necessary to actually make them a significantly better team. I think they've proven that with this roster that they can be very high level. I think it's just a question of towards the end of the year perhaps burning out, same sort of similar things that we were feeling, because they've clearly proven that they can compete at top level when they're firing on all cylinders. So I don't think they're in a rut right now. But if the first few months go badly, if they struggle at the RMR, for example, I think they'll be looking at maybe after the major that they might have to make a change. But I don't think for now I think they're fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to kind of wrap up our show here. Graham, thanks so much for coming on. Super appreciate it. For everyone looking for more Dust2 US content, we'll be following Complexity as they are now playing in the first open qualifier for the Rio Major. So we'll be doing a live stream watch party of that like we did for the Antwerp qualifier. So we'll be doing all of those. We might try and get some South America ones in there. Who knows? We'll try and have some fun with it. And yes, Graham, thanks so much for coming on. We'll hopefully see you guys soon, advancing soon. Liam as well. Thanks for always being my good co-host here, asking some good questions. And thanks to all the chatters for coming in and asking Graham some good questions and a good AMA here. So with that, I will say thank you. And with that, I will say adieu.
Thank you for having me, guys.